Pastor Ed here with Daily Devotions for Tuesday, May the 27th, 2025. Today, of course, is the day after Memorial Day, and kind of in honor of Memorial Day and all that it represents, I'm going to focus this entire week on kind of a Memorial Day theme and a single Bible passage taken from the Gospel of John, which reads as follows. It's John 15, verses 9 through 17. Jesus says, "As the Father has loved me, so I have loved you. Abide in my love. If you keep my commandments, you will abide in my love, just as I've kept my Father's commandments and abide in his love. I've said these things to you so that my joy may be in you and that your joy may be complete. This is my commandment, that you love one another as I have loved you. No one has greater love than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends. You are my friends if you do what I command you. I do not call you servants any longer, because the servant does not know what the master is doing, but I've called you friends because I've made known to you everything that I have heard from my Father. You did not choose me, but I chose you, and I appointed you to go and bear fruit that will last, so that the Father will give you whatever you ask him in my name. I'm giving you these commands so that you may love one another." I don't know whether you pay attention to these kinds of things, but Turner Classic Movies, AMC, they tend to, for Memorial Day weekend, show military films and stories of great heroism and so forth, and great sacrifice, obviously. The other night I was flipping through and they had the movie The Bridge on the River Kwai, 1958 multiple Oscar winner, including Alec Guinness for Best Actor and Best Film and so forth. Bridge on the River Kwai actually is a fictional story, but it's based on some real-life events. And some of what we know about that comes from an officer, a Scottish officer by the name of Ernest Gordon. He was a Scottish POW in World War II, and he wrote a book called Miracle on the River Kwai to tell the story of his experiences at the hands of the Japanese as he and his fellow soldiers were forced to work on the Burma-Siam Railroad, which is basically the true story behind the 1957 movie The Bridge on the River Kwai that won all those Oscars in 1958. The cost to construct this Burma-Siam railway was astronomical. There were 393 fatalities for each mile of track laid. In other words, the prisoners died as they labored under inhumane conditions. Oppressive heat, tropical diseases, stinging insects, inadequate food and clothing and shelter exposed the workers to harsh elements in the Thai jungle. Many succumbed to the brutal environment. Others, suspected of lagging, were bayoneted or decapitated by sadistic guards. Like frightened, cornered animals, the men adopted an extreme survival mentality. Prisoner-on-prisoner crime was rampant. Men were motivated primarily by fear and hate. Gordon described their descent into hell. As conditions steadily worsened, as starvation, exhaustion, and disease took an ever-growing toll, the atmosphere in which we lived was increasingly poisoned by selfishness, hatred, and fear. We were slipping rapidly down the scale of degradation. We lived by the rule of the jungle, survival of the fittest. It was a case of I look out for myself and to hell with everyone else. The weak were trampled underfoot, the sick ignored or resented, the dead forgotten. When a man lay dying, we had no word of mercy. When he cried for our help, we averted our heads. We had long since resigned ourselves to being derelicts. We were forsaken men, and now even God had left us. Hate, for some reason, was the only motivation for living. We hated the Japanese. We would willingly have torn them limb from limb, flesh from flesh, had they fallen into our hands. And then one day, a shovel changed everything. Gordon writes, at the end of each day, the tools were collected from the work party, and on one occasion, a Japanese guard shouted that a shovel was missing and demanded to know which man had taken it. He began to rant and rave, working himself up into a paranoid fury, and ordered whoever was guilty to step forward. No one moved. All die, he shrieked, cocking and aiming his rifle at the prisoners. And at that moment, one man stepped forward. The guard clubbed him to death with his rifle while he stood silently to attention. When they returned to camp, the tools were counted again, and no shovel was missing. Well, word of this spread like wildfire through the whole camp. An innocent man had been willing to die to save the others. This one man's selfless sacrifice revolutionized the camp's atmosphere. Many sought out answers about how to prepare for death and be ready to meet God. Ernest Gordon himself became the unofficial camp chaplain. A small church was erected, prayer was held nightly. Faith, Gordon said, thrives when there is no hope but God, and God did not disappoint. And the men began to treat each other like brothers with care and kindness, and Gordon described their efforts. Death was still with us, but we were slowly being freed from its destructive grip. We were seeing for ourselves the sharp contrast between forces that made for life and those that made for death. Selfishness, hatred, envy, jealousy, greed, self-intelligence, laziness, and pride were anti-life. Love, heroism, self-sacrifice, sympathy, mercy, integrity, and creative faith were the essence of life, turning mere existence into living in the truest sense. These were gifts of God to men. There was still hatred, but there was also love. There was death, but there was also life. God had not left us. He was with us, calling us to live the divine life in fellowship. Well, a jungle university sprung up. Prisoners of different backgrounds taught classes. Artists made materials and mounted an exhibition of their work. Musicians crafted instruments and held recitals. Gardeners tended beds of medicinal plants. Prisoner-on-prisoner crime dropped dramatically. So complete was the transformation in some of the men that upon liberation they extended kindness, not revenge, toward their former captors. When the victorious Allies swept in, the skeletal survivors lined up in front of their captors. Instead of attacking them, they said, "No more hatred, no more killing. Now what we need is forgiveness." Sacrificial love has transforming power. The impact of the unnamed man's sacrifice on the camp was a snapshot of the power of Christ's death to transform lives. It changes everything. We can focus on eternal realities in spite of the horrific present tense circumstances. Neither their status as prisoners nor their captors' attitude toward them changed, but the men were no longer the same. Salvation in Christ offers to all the same opportunity. In the world, but not of it, we may rise victorious over the direst of circumstances. Well, after the war, Ernest Gordon became a Presbyterian minister. He eventually moved to the United States, where he became the dean of the chapel at Princeton University. I'd like to close with a prayer of St. Ignatius. Lord, teach me to serve you as you deserve, to give and not count the cost, to fight and not heed the wounds, to toil and not seek for rest, to labor and not look for reward, save that of knowing that I do your holy will. Well, again, yesterday and indeed for the rest of the week, we're going to remember the great sacrifice, the great love shown by others on our behalf and on behalf of indeed the entire world. So hope you'll stay with me as we continue this theme based on John 15 about laying down one's life for one's friends. Until tomorrow, take care. Bye.